A decade of silence, shattered by the glint of rusted metal beneath a merciless sun. For Liam, the discovery of his family's long-lost Land Rover in the treacherous Devil's Anvil was not an end, but the terrifying beginning of a truth far darker than he could ever have imagined. What secrets did the unforgiving desert hold, and what became of his mother and sister? The answers would unearth a nightmare. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss an update on this gripping story. And let us know in the comments below what you think Liam will find. The Mojave sun was a malevolent eye, glaring down upon Liam O'Connell as he navigated the treacherous, heat-blasted expanse of the Devil's Anvil. 10 years. 10 years to the day since his mother, Alara, and his 6-year-old sister, Lyra, had driven into this unforgiving wilderness for a weekend of celestial bonding, as Alara had playfully called their stargazing trips, and vanished without a trace. Liam, then a sullen 16-year-old, had scoffed at the idea, preferring the company of his video games to the boring old rocks and too much quiet. The guilt of that refusal had been a brand on his soul ever since. Sweat plastered his dark hair to his forehead, his wide-brimmed hat a flimsy defense against the relentless furnace. The metal detector in his hand, a relic from his grandfather's prospecting days, felt like an anchor, yet he swept it in practiced arcs, his gaze scanning the cracked earth. Behind him, his best friend, Finn Riley, a sturdy figure with a perpetually sunburned nose, consulted a battered map and a compass. "Are you sure about this quadrant, Liam?" Finn's voice was raspy, the desert air having stolen its usual boisterousness. "We've been combing this stretch for hours. Feels like we're chasing ghosts in a furnace." Liam paused, wiping a grimy hand across his brow. "Thanks for sticking with me, Finn. I know you'd rather be at Cassidy's cantina chasing that new waitress than chasing my shadows." Finn snorted, adjusting the heavy pack on his shoulders. "Hey, a promise is a promise. You helped me fix up that Rust Bucket 68 Charger I bought. I play Desert Sherpa. Though, I reckon you're getting the better end of this deal. That Charger's a beauty, or will be." A ghost of a smile touched Liam's lips, but it vanished as he surveyed the hostile landscape. The Serpent's Tooth Mountains jagged the distant horizon, their peaks like broken fangs against the azure sky. "It was exactly 10 years ago today," Liam said, his voice low, almost a whisper against the sighing wind. "Mum took Lyra. I told Grandma I was too old for kitty camping." He let out a bitter laugh. "Too cool, more like too stupid." Finn nodded, a familiar sorrow in his eyes. He'd heard the story countless times, a recurring threnody in their decade-long friendship. He knew Liam needed to voice it, to keep the wound open, because closing it would mean accepting defeat. "Mum was obsessed with this place," Liam continued, his eyes distant. "Said her own father brought her out here, taught her the constellations, said it was in our blood, this connection to the raw earth. She wanted Lyra to feel it, to know there was more to life than screens and city noise." The wind whipped up, swirling dust devils around their ankles. Finn pulled his bandana higher over his nose. "One night," Liam's voice cracked. "Just one night they were supposed to be gone, back by lunchtime the next day. But they never came home, Finn. 10 years, and it's like the desert just swallowed them whole." Finn remembered the frantic, sprawling search efforts that had followed. Liam, a shattered teenager, had somehow managed to rally a small army of local volunteers, their initial hopeful energies slowly eroded by the sheer scale and hostility of the Devil's Anvil. Sheriff Brody and his deputies had scoured the area for months. Every discarded water bottle, every tattered piece of fabric, even a brightly colored plastic butterfly Lyra had cherished, had brought a fleeting, agonizing surge of hope, only to lead to dead ends. "The sheriff gave up after 3 years," Liam said, his voice hardening, the memory still a fresh sting. "Told me Alara probably just left. Took Lyra, started a new life. Said women did that sometimes." He spat on the parched ground. "He didn't know my mother. She wouldn't just vanish. Not without a word. Not from me. Not from Lyra." The disappearance had consumed Liam. After his grandmother passed away 5 years ago, the last tether to a normal life seemed to fray further. His grandmother, a stoic woman who knew the desert's moods, had been his rock, her quiet persistence a mirror of his own. Now he carried the torch alone, the search and obsession that had shaped his young adulthood. "I think we should push further west," Liam said suddenly, pointing towards a series of increasingly rugged, sun-baked canyons that lay beyond the officially searched zones. "I've been over the safe areas 100 times. What if they got lost? Tried a different route back?" Finn frowned, uncapping his canteen. "The park rangers warned us, Liam. West of Coyote Gulch is uncharted, unstable. No cell service, flash flood country if a freak storm hits. It's where the old prospectors used to say the earth itself held grudges." "Not that far," Liam insisted, his eyes glinting with a desperate fervor. "Just beyond where Brody's boys stopped looking. Please, Finn, for me." Finn sighed, taking a long swig of water. "All right, O'Connell. But if we see a single sidewinder bigger than my boot, or if that charger of mine so much as gets a scratch when we get back, you're buying the beers at Cassidy's for a month." He winked, trying to lighten the mood. "And you're still on charger duty." Liam nodded, his mind already racing ahead. As they pressed onward, the terrain became more brutal. Loose scree shifted underfoot, and steep, crumbling inclines forced them to choose their paths carefully. At the last rise, where a weak bar of cell signal flickered on Finn's phone, he paused. "Sending a ping to Sarah," he said, referring to his girlfriend. "Insurance. If we become desert jerky, at least she'll know where to send the buzzards." They pushed on, the landscape growing more alien and foreboding. Another hour passed under the oppressive heat. Finn, breathing heavily, finally stopped. "Liam, man, we gotta turn back," he said, his voice firm. "Water's running low, no signal, and I swear that rock just hissed at me. This is exactly why they call it the Devil's Anvil." "Just a little further," Liam pleaded, pointing to a jagged ridge overlooking a deep, shadowed arroyo. "Let me check over that rise. One last look, then we head back, I promise." Reluctantly, Finn agreed. "Fine, but I'm waiting here. You go to that cliff edge, take your peek, and then we're done. Seriously done." Liam nodded gratefully and scrambled ahead alone. The heat was a physical weight, the sun a hammer. As he neared the lip of the steep-walled washout, squinting against the glare, something snagged his attention. Not a natural color. A dull, metallic glint, half buried at the bottom of the canyon, almost swallowed by creosote bushes and years of wind-blown sand. His heart hammered against his ribs. He edged closer, his boots dislodging a cascade of small stones that rattled into the chasm. And then he saw it clearly. An overturned vehicle. A dark green Land Rover, caked in dust, its undercarriage exposed like the belly of a dead beast. On its rear bumper, faded but still visible, was a sticker, a stylized silver wolf howling at a crescent moon. Ilara's good luck charm. "Finn!" he roared, his voice cracking, a raw sound torn from his throat. "Finn, get over here, now!" Finn, alarmed by the urgency, scrambled up the incline, his face a mask of concern that morphed into stunned disbelief as Liam pointed, trembling, into the ravine below. That's Mum's Land Rover," Liam whispered, his hands shaking so violently he could barely keep his balance. "The wolf sticker, I'd know it anywhere." Finn squinted, his jaw dropping. He fumbled for his phone, snapping pictures despite the poor light in the canyon. "Holy hell, Liam! You're right, that's definitely a vehicle down there." Liam was already scanning the treacherous canyon walls, a wild, desperate look in his eyes. "We need to get down there. There might be something. Anything." "No." Finn grabbed his arm, his grip like iron. "Absolutely not, Liam. Those walls are sheer. We don't have ropes, no gear. It's a death trap." He took a deep breath, his voice regaining some measure of authority. "We go back. Right now. We call Sheriff Thorne. This is what you've been searching for, mate. Don't throw your life away when you're this close. Let the professionals handle it." Liam stared at the Land Rover, a maelstrom of emotions. Dread, hope, terror, a strange, hollow triumph, churning within him. He finally, reluctantly, nodded. He watched as Finn meticulously marked their GPS coordinates on his offline map app, then turned to follow his friend back the way they had come, each step away from the canyon feeling like a betrayal, yet also a step towards answers he wasn't sure he was ready to face. The silence of the desert suddenly felt heavier, laden with unspoken possibilities, none of them good. The trek back to Finn's battered but reliable Jeep felt like an eternity, each step weighted with the gravity of their discovery. The Devil's Anvil, usually a place of desolate emptiness for Liam, now pulsed with a sinister significance. The rusted Land Rover at the bottom of that remote arroyo wasn't just a vehicle, it was a tombstone, a 10-year-old question mark finally punctuated by a grim exclamation point. Finn, usually talkative, remained mostly silent, occasionally glancing at Liam with a mixture of concern and awe. He knew this discovery would change everything for his friend, but whether for better or worse was a terrifying unknown. The Jeep, parked precariously on a rocky outcrop where the trail had become impassable, was a welcome sight. The moment they hit a patch of intermittent cell service near the abandoned Oro Grande mine works, Liam's fingers, clumsy with adrenaline, dialed a number he knew by heart, the direct line to Sheriff Marcus Thorne's office in the county seat of Redemption. Thorne, a relatively new sheriff who'd taken over from the retired Brody 5 years ago, was a harder man, less prone to easy dismissals. He'd reopened Ilara and Lyra's case as a cold one, reviewing the files, though with limited resources, he hadn't been able to mount a new large-scale search. "Thorne," a gruff voice answered on the third ring. "Sheriff, it's Liam O'Connell," Liam said, his words tumbling out. "We found it. We found my mother's Land Rover. It's in a ravine deep in the Devil's Anvil west of Coyote Gulch." A beat of silence on the other end, then Thorne's voice, sharper now, tinged with professional caution. "Liam, are you certain it's her vehicle?" "Positive, Sheriff. It's the dark green '98 Defender. Still has the wolf and moon sticker on the bumper. Finn's got photos. We can send them." He glanced at Finn, who nodded, already fumbling with his phone to attach the images to a text. "Send them through," Thorne commanded, "and give me your exact coordinates. Don't touch anything. Stay put if you can, or meet me at the rendezvous point we used for the fire drill last spring, the old ranger station at Scorpion Pass. I'll mobilize SAR and a recovery team. We're already heading out, Sheriff." "Low on water," Liam replied, as Finn navigated a particularly nasty stretch of washboard road. "We'll meet you at Scorpion Pass." "Understood. A 1 hour for me. SAR will be another 30 after that." "And O'Connell?" Thorne's voice softened slightly. "Try to breathe. We'll figure this out." The drive to Scorpion Pass was a blur. Finn, despite the rough terrain, pushed the Jeep, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When they finally pulled up to the dilapidated ranger station, Sheriff Thorne's county cruiser was already there, a beacon of authority in the fading light. Thorne, a tall, weathered man with flinty gray eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, was conferring with 2 deputies. He acknowledged Liam and Finn with a curt nod as they approached. "Show me the photos on a bigger screen." Inside the station, he projected Finn's phone images onto a dusty wall map of the region. The search and rescue, SAR, team leader, a wiry woman named Diaz, with equally intense eyes, arrived minutes later. "The location you've marked, O'Connell," Thorne said, tapping the map, "is damn near inaccessible. Diaz, can your team rappel down there and assess the vehicle for safe extraction?" Diaz studied the topography. "It'll be tricky, Sheriff. Steep, unstable walls. We'll need to set up a high-angle rig. And we'll need to do it fast if we want to get it out before dark, or we wait till morning." "We move now," Thorne decided. "I've called in a heavy-duty wrecker with a long-reach crane from Calipatria, but they're 2 hours out. Get your team ready. O'Connell, Riley, you ride with me. You'll guide us as close as we can get by vehicle." Within the hour, a convoy was bumping its way back into the Devil's Anvil, Thorne's cruiser, the SAR truck, and 2 deputy vehicles. They took a barely discernible old mining track that Thorne knew, which brought them to within a half-mile of the arroyo. From there, it was on foot. The scene at the ravine's edge was a hive of controlled activity. SAR specialists, roped and harnessed, were already preparing their descent. A drone, launched by one of the deputies, buzzed overhead, transmitting live video of the Land Rover, now starkly illuminated by portable floodlights as dusk rapidly fell. Liam watched, his heart a leaden weight, as 2 SAR members expertly rappelled into the chasm. Hours seemed to crawl by. The air grew cold. Finally, word came up. The vehicle was empty. No human remains were immediately visible inside or in the immediate vicinity. It was crushed on the passenger side, as if it had rolled. "They'll secure it for the crane lift," Thorne explained, his breath misting in the chilly air. "Then the forensics team from county will go over it with a fine-tooth comb back at the impound yard." Slowly, painstakingly, under the glare of the floodlights, the crushed Land Rover was winched from its 10-year tomb. As it was gently lowered onto the flatbed of the massive tow truck that had finally arrived, Liam stepped forward, an irresistible pull drawing him towards the wreck. Thorne put a firm hand on his shoulder. "Let the forensics guys do their sweep first, son. Standard procedure." The vehicle was in horrific condition. Tires shredded, the frame twisted, the once proud dark green paint almost entirely scoured off by grit and sun or caked in baked mud. Forensic technicians in white coveralls swarmed it, their cameras flashing, their gloved hands carefully bagging small items. One of the technicians, a woman with cropped silver hair, beckoned Thorne over after about 20 minutes. They spoke in low tones, then Thorne returned to Liam and Finn, his expression unreadable. "Initial assessment, Liam," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Based on the rust patterns, the settling of dust, and the vegetation growth around and under it, this vehicle hasn't been here for 10 years. Liam stared. "What? That's impossible. It's my mother's Prout. It has to be from when they disappeared." "I'm not saying it isn't her Defender," Thorne clarified, his gray eyes holding Liam's. "But the forensic botanist and the corrosion expert estimate it's been in this specific ravine for approximately 6, maybe 7 years. Tops." Finn, ever practical, voiced the question hanging heavy in the frigid air. "So, what does that mean, Sheriff? Someone moved it here, years later?" "That's the working theory," Thorne confirmed grimly. "Someone took the vehicle after your mother and sister vanished, kept it hidden somewhere for 3 or 4 years, then drove it, or pushed it, off this cliff. Probably waited until the initial searches died down. The media attention faded. The ground seemed to tilt beneath Liam's feet. All these years, he'd clung to various scenarios. A tragic accident, a Lara getting lost, a mechanical failure. But this was deliberate. Malicious. The thought that someone had actively, coldly, calculatedly hidden this evidence, possibly after harming his family, sent a fresh wave of nausea through him. As the technicians continued their meticulous work, one of them let out a small exclamation. He was crouched by the Land Rover's mangled rear, where a small, reinforced storage compartment was built into the chassis, a custom edition Ilara had commissioned for her emergency gear. It had been pried open, but wedged deep inside, almost invisible, was a small, hardened plastic case. "Found this, Sheriff," the technician called, holding up the dust-caked box. "Looks like a Pelican case or similar, wedged tight under a bent strut." Thorne took the case. It was an equipment case, the kind used for delicate electronics. He brought it over to Liam. "Recognize this?" Liam's breath hitched. That's Mum's drone case. She bought a small, high-end quadcopter for aerial photography just before that trip. The case was warped, the latches almost fused shut by years of extreme temperature fluctuations. Thorne carefully worked at it with a multi-tool. Liam held his breath. With a sharp crack, the lid popped open. "It's empty," Liam said, a fresh wave of disappointment washing over him. The custom foam interior was molded to hold a drone, a controller, and spare batteries. All gone. "Makes sense," Thorne mused. "A good drone would have been valuable, easy to sell." But Finn, who had been peering intently into the case, suddenly pointed. "Wait a sec. What's that, tucked in the side seam of the foam?" He carefully slid a finger into a tiny crevice between the protective foam and the hard plastic shell. His fingertip emerged with something small and black. A micro SD memory card. Thorne took it gingerly. "Well now, let's see what ghosts are on this little fella." The discovery of the micro SD card sent a jolt of tense anticipation through the cold desert night. Sheriff Thorne handled the tiny piece of plastic as if it were a live explosive. "We'll take this back to the station in Redemption. Got a forensics lab there that can try to recover whatever's on it, if it's not too corrupted." Liam felt a desperate, fragile hope bloom in his chest, a dangerous sensation he hadn't allowed himself in years. "Can I be there, Sheriff? When you look at it?" Thorne considered him for a long moment, his gaze unwavering. "All right, O'Connell, you and Riley can wait at the station. But if there's anything sensitive, I'll review it first." The drive back to Redemption was a somber affair. The mangled Land Rover, shrouded on the flatbed, followed them like a hearse. Liam sat in Thorne's cruiser, the silence thick with unspoken fears and possibilities. Finn, in his own Jeep, trailed behind, occasionally catching Liam's eye in the rearview mirror with a look of grim solidarity. At the sheriff's department, a sterile, modern building that felt a world away from the raw desolation of the Devil's Anvil, they were led to a small, windowless viewing room. A young technician with tired eyes, introduced as Deputy Miller, a digital forensics specialist, was already setting up a laptop and a card reader. "The card's got some corrosion on the contacts," Miller reported after an initial examination under a magnifying lamp. "Gonna try a gentle clean first." He meticulously worked on the card with a specialized swab and solution. Liam watched, his fists clenched, every nerve ending screaming. After what felt like an age, Miller carefully inserted the card into the reader. The laptop whirred. An icon popped up on the screen. "Got something," Miller breathed, a hint of surprise in his voice. He clicked it open. A folder appeared, simply titled DCIM Alara. Inside, dozens of video files, dated sequentially, corresponding to the days Alara and Lyra were meant to be camping. "It worked," Liam whispered, leaning closer, his heart pounding. Miller clicked on the first file. The screen flickered, then resolved into a sun-drenched image. Alara Mercer O'Connell. Her blonde hair tied back in a practical ponytail, her face alive with the joy of the outdoors, smiled into the camera. The drone's camera. Beside her, perched on the Land Rover's fender, sat Lyra, a gap-toothed grin on her face, her small hand waving enthusiastically at the hovering drone. She was wearing a bright yellow t-shirt with a cartoon sun on it. "Mum," Liam choked out, the word a raw ache. "Lyra," tears welled, blurring his vision. Finn put a comforting hand on his shoulder. They watched, mesmerized, as Miller played file after file. Videos of their campsite, the tent neatly set up. Alara pointing out desert plants to an inquisitive Lyra. Lyra chasing a lizard, her delighted squeals echoing faintly from the laptop speakers. Moments of ordinary happiness, frozen in time, now imbued with an unbearable poignancy. Each clip was short, clearly just tests of the new drone. Then came the final video. It began normally, with Lyra making funny faces at the drone as it hovered close. Then, the drone ascended rapidly, capturing a sweeping panoramic vista of the surrounding desert. The Serpent's Tooth Mountains dominated one horizon, a distinctive rock formation Liam recognized as Sleeping Dragon Ridge, visible to the east. "Hold it there, Miller," Thorne said sharply, leaning in. "Freeze that frame." He studied the panoramic shot intently. Based on those landmarks, Sleeping Dragon, the orientation of the Serpent's Tooth, we can pinpoint their campsite. They were exactly where Alara said they'd be, in the designated camping area within Blue Mesa Park. Miles from where we found that rover, and in a completely different direction from Coyote Gulch. "So, someone, definitely, moved the vehicle," Finn stated. The conclusion stark. "And they didn't just move it," Thorne added, his voice grim. "They took them from that campsite." This footage, if it's the last recorded, proves they were alive and well in a known, relatively safe location. This is no longer just a missing persons case with a recovered vehicle. O'Connell.com. This is now officially a criminal investigation. Probable abduction, possible homicide. Liam felt the room sway. The abstract horror he'd lived with for a decade suddenly had a concrete, malevolent shape. His mother and sister hadn't just been victims of the desert, they had been victims of someone. Thorne had a technician make copies of the video files onto a secure USB drive for Liam. "Take these, but be prepared. The media will be all over this once word gets out about the Land Rover." It was a high-profile case back in the day. As if on cue, Thorne's desk phone buzzed. His secretary's voice crackled through the intercom. "Sheriff, Channel 8 News is on line 1, asking about activity in the Devil's Anvil. Apparently, a hiker with a scanner picked up some radio chatter." Thorne sighed. Knew it wouldn't take long. He looked at Liam. "We need to control the narrative. I'll hold a press conference in the morning. We'll announce the recovery, the new evidence from the drone, and that we're reopening this as an active criminal case." And Liam, his gaze was serious. "We need to release a new image of Lyra. An age. Progressed one. She'd be 16 now, not the little girl in those old missing posters. Someone might recognize her if..." He left the "if" hanging in the air. Liam hadn't considered that. How would he even recognize his own sister after 10 years? The thought was another stab of pain. The next morning, the press conference was a chaotic circus of flashing cameras and shouted questions. Liam, standing beside Sheriff Thorne, felt numb. Trent stood a little behind him, a silent pillar of support. When it was his turn to speak, Liam faced the cameras, his voice hoarse but steady. "My mother, Ilara, and my sister Lyra were taken from us 10 years ago. For a decade, we've lived in a nightmare of not knowing." He paused, swallowing hard, his eyes scanning the crowd of reporters as if searching for one specific face. "Lyra, if you're out there, if you can see this, I never stopped looking for you. Your big brother never gave up, and I never will. We're going to find you. We're going to bring you home." Sheriff Thorne then outlined the new developments, emphasizing the drone footage and the evidence suggesting the Land Rover had been moved years after the disappearance. He presented a digitally age-progressed image of Lyra, a young woman with Ilara's high cheekbones and what the artist imagined would be Liam's determined O'Connell eyes. He appealed to the public for any information, no matter how insignificant it might seem. As the press conference ended and the media scrum began to disperse, Thorne clapped Liam on the shoulder. "You did good, son. Now the hard part really begins. We follow where these new leads take us." Liam nodded, clutching the USB drive with the precious, painful videos. The desert had yielded one secret, but he knew with a chilling certainty that the Devil's Anvil was guarding far more, and the ghosts in that footage were whispering that the evil they'd encountered was chillingly human. The days following the press conference blurred into a monotonous cycle of waiting and restless energy for Liam. Sheriff Thorne and his team were meticulously re-examining every piece of old evidence, every witness statement, in light of the new discoveries. The drone footage had provided a clear location for Ilara and Lyra's last known whereabouts, and teams were now combing that specific area of Blue Mesa Park with a thoroughness that hadn't been possible 10 years prior, armed with better technology and a renewed sense of urgency. So far, nothing. Liam, unable to sit still, found himself drawn back to his small, cluttered house on the outskirts of Redemption. It had been his grandmother's, and he'd left Ilara's room untouched, a shrine to a life interrupted. In his own room, he powered up his old desktop computer, the drone footage USB clutched in his hand. He needed to see it again, to analyze every frame, every shadow, every pixel. He watched the videos over and over, the happy scenes of his mother and sister, a bittersweet torture. He focused on the panoramic shots, zooming in on distant terrain features. Ilara had flown the drone to its maximum range, capturing sweeping views. Most of it was familiar, landmarks he'd seen countless times on maps and during his own fruitless searches. But then, late one night, fueled by stale coffee and a gnawing emptiness, something caught his eye. In one of the widest panoramic shots, on the very edge of the frame, almost lost in the heat haze and distance, was a faint, jagged ridgeline he didn't recognize. It was far to the northwest, deeper into the truly inhospitable territory of the Serpent's Tooth Range, an area even the most desperate prospectors avoided. "That's not on any of the park maps," he muttered, a prickle of unease running down his spine. He remembered his grandfather, a retired geologist and amateur cartographer, had a collection of old survey-grade topographical maps stored in a dusty trunk in the attic. Some dated back to the early mining boom days of the region. He hauled the heavy trunk down, the scent of aged paper and forgotten history filling the small room. Spreading the yellowed, brittle maps across his desk, he carefully compared the ridgeline from the drone footage to the intricate contour lines on the old charts. It took nearly an hour of painstaking cross-referencing, his eyes burning before he found it. A remote, almost inaccessible cluster of peaks and box canyons, marked on one particularly old map from the 1940s with a faded annotation, Echo Ridge Mine Complex, patented claim, access restricted. Below it, in his grandfather's spidery handwriting, was a more recent note, probably from the 70s or 80s. Rumored unstable. Unsurveyed shafts. Danger. Stay clear. Echo Ridge Mine. He'd never heard of it. It wasn't a registered park area, nor was it marked on any modern recreational maps. It was a ghost, a forgotten scar on the face of the desert. A thrill, sharp and cold, shot through Liam. What if Ilara, an avid explorer with a geologist's curiosity, had somehow known about this place? What if she'd decided on an impromptu detour venturing off her planned route. It seemed unlikely given she had Lyra with her, but his mother had always been drawn to the wild, forgotten corners of the earth. Or, a darker thought surfaced. What if whoever took them had used this remote, dangerous, and forgotten place? He immediately photographed the map section and the corresponding drone screenshot with his phone, then texted the images to Sheriff Thorne and Finn. He glanced at the clock. 3:17 a.m. Too late or too early for a response. With a sigh, Liam leaned back, the old wooden chair creaking in protest. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sliver of something other than grief, a focused, almost predatory anticipation. The next morning, the station was a hive of activity when Liam arrived, bleary-eyed but wired. Finn was already there, nursing a coffee, looking surprisingly alert. "Got your text, mate? 3 in the bloody morning? You trying to give Thorne a coronary?" he greeted, handing Liam a steaming styrofoam cup. "Showed it to him already." Sheriff Thorne emerged from his office, looking tired but resolute, Liam's photos on his tablet. "O'Connell, this Echo Ridge mine. We need to check our records." He gestured for Liam to follow him. "My grandfather marked it as dangerous, restricted." Liam pressed. Thorne nodded. "I appreciate your diligence, Liam, and your grandfather was a knowledgeable man. But we can't just storm into an area like that, even if it's supposedly abandoned. If it's patented land, it's private property. And restricted access usually means there are reasons, possibly still valid ones, like unexploded ordnance from old mining tests or environmental hazards. But what if they were taken there?" Liam persisted, his voice tight. "What if whoever did this used it as a hideout? Or the place has been defunct for decades, according to initial checks?" Thorne explained patiently, pulling up a county registrar file on his computer. "No active claims, no permits filed for over 50 years. Access roads, if they ever truly existed, are likely long gone, swallowed by the desert. It's legally off-limits, and frankly, we have no concrete evidence suggesting your family was ever near it. The drone footage shows them miles away." Liam started to protest, but Thorne held up a hand. "We're sticking with the established search protocols for now, focusing on the Blue Mesa campsite and radiating outwards. If that yields nothing conclusive in the next 48 hours, then, and only then, will we consider expanding the search perimeter to include highly improbable and dangerous locations like Echo Ridge. We need probable cause, son." Recognizing the finality in Thorne's tone, Liam reluctantly nodded. "Fine. When do the teams head out today?" An hour later, they were back in the desert, a larger, more organized force this time. A mobile command unit had been set up near the Blue Mesa campsite. Thorne assigned Liam and Finn to wait at the command unit with a deputy, monitoring communications. "You're too close to this, O'Connell. Let my people do their jobs." As the search teams fanned out, Liam paced like a caged animal. Finn, ever resourceful, opened his laptop and tethered it to his phone's weak signal. "What are you doing?" Liam asked. "Looking for anything on Echo Ridge Mine," Finn replied, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Old newspaper archives, geological surveys, maybe even some urban explorer forums. If that place exists, someone, somewhere, might have posted about it." Liam stopped pacing, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. "You think I'm onto something?" "I think you're a stubborn mule who occasionally stumbles onto an oasis," Finn said with a wry grin. "Besides, now I'm curious. A mystery mine in the Serpent's Tooth? Sounds like the start of a bad horror movie. I'm in." For the next hour, they scoured the digital ether. Most references were historical footnotes, brief mentions in old mining journals. But then Finn let out a low whistle. Bingo. Or maybe not. Found a blog post from about 5 years ago. Some off-roading group. They tried to find Echo Ridge. Said the main access track was completely washed out, impassable even for their modified Jeeps. He zoomed in on a grainy satellite image attached to the post. But look here, they mentioned seeing what looked like faint, newer tire tracks diverging off the old trail, heading towards a series of box canyons west of the main ridge. They didn't follow them, too risky. Liam leaned closer, his heart quickening. Newer tracks? 5 years ago? Deputy Hanks, a young officer assigned to comms duty in the command tent, had been listening with growing interest. He ambled over. "Echo Ridge, huh? Heard old-timers talk about that place. Said it was cursed. Bad juju." He looked from Liam to Finn. If Sheriff Thorne isn't going to officially check it out right away, and if you guys were, hypothetically, thinking of taking a little unofficial scenic drive later, well, I might know a back way that bypasses the washed-out main trail. Used to hunt jackrabbits out that way as a kid. It's rough, but a good 4x4 could make it. Finn raised an eyebrow. Thorne would have our badges, and we don't have badges. Just a quick recon, Hank suggested, a glint of adventure in his eyes. Stay in the vehicle, observe from a distance. If you see anything at all, you call it in. I'll be busy on the other side of the radio mast for an hour or two. Plausible deniability for everyone. Liam looked at Finn. Finn hesitated, then slowly grinned. Well, my Charger does need some new parts, and you still owe me those beers, O'Connell. He grabbed his Jeep keys. Let's go poke a sleeping serpent. Telling the remaining officer they were doing a quick perimeter check for discarded supplies, Liam, Finn, and a now off-duty-looking Deputy Hanks piled into Finn's Jeep and, with a shared glance of trepidation and excitement, headed towards the forbidden territory of the Serpent's Tooth and the mystery of Echo Ridge Mine. The journey to Echo Ridge was brutal. Deputy Hanks, true to his word, guided Finn along a barely discernible track that snaked through narrow canyons and over rocky, uneven mesas. The Jeep groaned and bucked, its oversized tires scrabbling for purchase on loose shale and sun-baked clay. Liam sat rigidly in the passenger seat, his gaze fixed on the increasingly wild and desolate landscape. The Serpent's Tooth Mountains loomed larger, their jagged peaks seeming to watch their approach with silent menace. After nearly 2 punishing hours, Hanks pointed. Should be just over that rise. The old access road to Echo Ridge, or what's left of it. Finn carefully navigated the Jeep up the incline. The vista that opened before them was breathtakingly stark. A wide, barren valley stretched out, dominated by the crumbling infrastructure of what was once a significant mining operation. Dilapidated headframes stood like skeletal sentinels over collapsed adits. Rusted machinery lay half-buried in the sand, and a few weathered, windowless buildings sagged under the weight of time and neglect. Looks dead as a doornail, Finn muttered, cutting the engine. A profound, almost suffocating silence descended, broken only by the whisper of the wind through the desolate structures. Hanks produced a pair of powerful binoculars from his pack. Let's take a look-see. He scanned the area methodically. Nothing. No movement. No fresh tracks that I can see from here. Looks like those off-roaders were right. This place is a tomb. He passed the binoculars to Liam. Liam swept the binoculars across the scene. The sense of decay was palpable. Broken timbers, piles of tailings, the dark maws of old mine shafts. It felt like a place where hope had come to die. It looks abandoned for a century, Liam admitted, a familiar wave of disappointment washing over him. Another dead end. We should head back, Hank said, his adventurous spark dimming. Report to Thorne that it's clear, at least from this vantage. Nothing to see here. Reluctantly, Liam agreed. As Finn carefully turned the Jeep, Liam took one last look at the desolate mine, the faint hope that had propelled him here guttering like a dying flame. The drive back felt even longer. They decided to refuel at a dusty, isolated service station on Highway 78, a lonely outpost colloquially known as Last Chance Gas. As Finn pulled up to the ancient pump, Liam stepped out to stretch his legs, his mind replaying the bleak images of Echo Ridge. I'll go pay inside, Finn said, heading towards the small, fly-specked convenience store attached to the station. Hanks remained in the Jeep, scrolling through his phone, likely checking for any missed calls from dispatch. Liam leaned against the Jeep, gazing out at the shimmering heat haze rising from the asphalt. He was lost in thought, a miasma of frustration and exhaustion, and didn't notice the battered pickup truck that had silently pulled in behind them, parking near the darkened car wash bay. He didn't register the 4 men who emerged, moving with a quiet, predatory purpose. The first blow was a blinding explosion of pain at the back of his head. He staggered, stars erupting in his vision, a grunt of surprise and agony escaping his lips. Before he could react or cry out, rough hands seized him, a foul-smelling cloth clamped over his mouth and nose, pungent with a chemical sweetness that made his senses reel. He fought back instinctively, landing a wild punch that connected with something solid, eliciting a grunt. But they were too many, too strong. He saw Finn burst out of the convenience store, shouting, his face a mask of fury and alarm. Then another, more brutal impact to his temple, and the world dissolved into a suffocating, silent blackness. When Liam regained consciousness, his head was a symphony of agony. Each pulse was a hammer blow against his skull. He blinked, his vision swimming. He was lying on a rough, dirt-caked floor. A single bare bulb hanging from a rafter cast long, dancing shadows in a cavernous space. The air was thick with the smell of stale beer, dust, and something else. Metallic, like old machinery. He tried to sit up, and a wave of nausea roiled through him. His hands were bound tightly behind his back with what felt like zip ties. As his eyes adjusted, he could make out rough-hewn wooden walls, a long scarred bar counter in one corner, and shelves laden with dusty bottles and strange, unidentifiable objects. It looked like an abandoned subterranean saloon, or a very well-hidden speakeasy. Through a small, grimy window high up on one wall, he could see a sliver of bruised twilight sky. Well, look who decided to join the party. A voice, gravelly and cold, came from the shadows near the bar. A figure emerged, tall, rangy, with a scar that bisected one eyebrow and gave him a perpetual sneer. He was cleaning a long-bladed knife with an oily rag. "Thought you'd sleep till Judgment Day, rich boy." Another man, shorter but built like a bull, chuckled. "Boss ain't gonna be happy you brought him here, Pike. He said discourage him, not kidnap him." "He was snooping around Echo Ridge with a cop," Pike retorted. "And he's the one from the news, the one looking for his long-lost mommy. Boss will want to have a word, believe me." Liam's blood ran cold. Echo Ridge. These men knew. The heavy wooden door at the far end of the room creaked open, and a third man entered. He was older, broader, with an air of chilling authority. His eyes, the color of muddy water, were cold and appraising as they settled on Liam. This had to be the boss. Behind him, Liam caught a fleeting glimpse of a figure lurking in the doorway's shadow, slender, with a fall of dark blonde hair, before they melted back out of sight. Something about that fleeting glimpse tugged at a forgotten corner of Liam's memory, but the throbbing in his head made coherent thought difficult. "What in the blazes did you idiots do?" the boss demanded, his voice a low rumble that nevertheless carried the unmistakable threat of violence. He glared at Pike. "I told you to make sure the curious stayed away from the mine, not bring them into my parlor." Pike gestured towards Liam with his knife. "Boss, this is him, the O'Connell kid, the one whose family vanished years ago, the one Sheriff Thorne's got sniffing around again. He was at Echo Ridge today, with Hanks the deputy." The boss cursed, a string of vivid expletives. "You brainless morons! You brought him here? Now Thorne will have this whole damned county crawling with cops looking for him and the deputy." He paced for a moment, then turned back to Liam, his expression a mixture of fury and cold calculation. "So, Mr. O'Connell, you've been a very persistent nuisance. Tell me, what exactly were you hoping to find at my mine?" Liam cleared his throat, his voice raspy. "My mother, Ilara, my sister, Lyra, they disappeared 10 years ago. Their Land Rover. It was found near Coyote Gulch, but it was moved. I think they might have come here." The boss let out a harsh laugh that held no humor. "Your mother and sister? Oh, I remember them. Feisty woman, your mother. Came exploring where she shouldn't have, with her fancy drone and her little girl. Stumbled onto something she wasn't meant to see." His eyes narrowed. "People who see too much in the Devil's Anvil tend to stay." Liam's heart constricted. "What did you do to them?" The boss smiled, a predatory baring of teeth. "Your mother fought. Had a gun even. Pulled it on 2 of my best men." His smile vanished. "It was a regrettable necessity. Accidents happen in the desert, Mr. O'Connell, especially to those who don't respect boundaries." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "As for the girl, Lyra, was it? Such a pretty little thing. Too young to understand, too adaptable." A horrifying suspicion began to dawn in Liam's mind. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice shaking with a terrible premonition. "What have you done with my sister?" The boss straightened up, a cruel amusement dancing in his eyes. "Oh, she's around. Quite the asset, actually. Learned quickly. Doesn't ask too many questions anymore. Knows her place." He jerked his head towards the door through which he'd entered. "Lara, get in here. We have a guest. Someone from your distant past." The door opened, and the slender figure from before stepped into the dim light. She was young, perhaps 16 or 17, with long, sun-bleached blonde hair and eyes the exact shade of Alara's, a startling, clear sapphire blue. But these eyes were different, haunted, wary, and holding a chilling emptiness that made Liam's soul ache. She wore utilitarian clothes, faded and patched, and moved with a quiet, almost fearful deference. "Lara," the boss said, his voice deceptively gentle, "say hello to your brother. Liam, meet Lara, or, as you might remember her, Lyra." Liam stared, his world tilting on its axis. It was her, older, scarred by experiences he couldn't fathom, but unmistakably Lyra, his sister, alive. And a prisoner, or worse, a part of this nightmare. The name Lara felt like another brand, another theft. The last vestiges of his hope for a simple resolution crumbled into dust. This was not a rescue. It was a descent into hell itself. The revelation struck Liam with the force of a physical blow. Lyra, his little sister, standing before him, a ghost resurrected from a 10-year nightmare, yet so utterly changed she was almost a stranger. The name, Lara, echoed in the stale air of the subterranean bar. A name imposed, a life stolen. Her sapphire eyes, so like their mother's, held no spark of recognition, only a guarded weariness and a subtle, ingrained fear as she glanced from Liam to the man she called boss, Silas, as Liam would soon learn his name was. "Brother?" Her voice was soft, hesitant, with a faint, unplaceable accent, the lilt of the desert rather than the city they'd once shared. She looked at Liam, then quickly away, as if direct eye contact was forbidden or dangerous. "Lyra," Liam breathed, the name a prayer and a wound. "It's me, Liam. Don't you remember?" Silas chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Memory's a funny thing, O'Connell, especially for one so young when her world changed. Lara here has a new life, a new family, the one that took her in when she was lost and alone in the desert." He placed a proprietary hand on her shoulder, and Liam saw her flinch almost imperceptibly. "You kidnapped her?" Liam spat, struggling against his bonds. "You murdered our mother?" "Such harsh words," Silas said, his eyes glinting. "Your mother made a fatal miscalculation. Lara here was a foundling. We provided for her, kept her safe." He gave her shoulder a squeeze. "She's useful, earns her keep. Don't you, Lara?" "Yes, Silas," she murmured, her gaze fixed on the floor. Liam's heart ached. This was not the joyful reunion he'd dared to dream of in his darkest hours. This was a twisted perversion of it. Lara was alive, but she was a captive, her spirit seemingly broken, her identity reshaped by these brutal men. Over the next few hours, or perhaps days, time became a blur in the dim, oppressive atmosphere of the underground den. Liam learned more about their operation. Silas and his crew weren't just petty poachers. Echo Ridge Mine was their fortress, their base for a sophisticated smuggling operation. They dealt in illicit antiquities plundered from protected archaeological sites deep within the Devil's Anvil, and across the border, priceless artifacts sold to shadowy collectors. Alara, with her drone, had likely inadvertently filmed something incriminating during her panoramic sweeps, perhaps a convoy or activity at the mine itself, if she'd ventured closer than her last recorded footage showed. Liam was kept bound in a dark, unused storage room adjoining the main bar area. He was given food and water, enough to keep him alive but little else. Pike and the other man, a hulking brute named Cletus, seemed to enjoy taunting him, but it was Lara who brought him his meager rations. She would enter silently, place the tray down without meeting his eyes, and leave just as quickly. Liam tried to talk to her, to reach her. "Lyra, please," he'd whisper. "You have to remember, our home in Redemption, Grandma O'Connell's apple pies. The treehouse Dad built before he left." She never responded, her face a carefully constructed mask of indifference. Yet, Liam thought he saw flickerings, a momentary hesitation in her step, a quick, furtive glance that hinted at something stirring beneath the surface. One evening, as she brought him a tin cup of water, he tried a different approach. "The wolf sticker on Mum's Land Rover. You loved that sticker. You called it Moondog. You cried when Mum said she might take it off because it was peeling." She froze, her back to him. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, Very slowly, she turned. Her sapphire eyes, for the first time, met his directly. There was a flicker of something in their depths, confusion, pain, a dawning, terrified recognition. "Moondog," she whispered, the words sounding foreign on her tongue. I dream sometimes. A woman with hair like sunshine. She calls me Lyra." Hope, sharp and fierce, surged through Liam. "Yes, that was Mum. Ilara. And you are Lyra, my sister." She shook her head, her eyes darting towards the door, as if fearing Silas might materialize. "Number, I am Lara. Silas, he saved me. He said my parents abandoned me in the desert." "He's lying, Lyra," Liam insisted, his voice urgent but low. "He killed our mother. He stole you. This isn't your life. This is a prison." Lyra pressed her hands to her temples, a look of profound distress on her face. I don't know what to believe." She backed away, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and dawning horror. He's always protected me from the others, from the harshness." "Protection or control," Liam countered gently. "Lyra, think. Are you truly free here? Can you leave if you want to?" The question hung in the air. She looked around the grim subterranean space, her gaze lingering on the barred windows, the heavy bolted door. The illusion Silas had so carefully constructed around her for a decade was beginning to crack. The next time she came, hours later, there was a new resolve in her eyes, mingled with a deep-seated fear. She moved quickly, silently. Instead of just leaving the food, she knelt beside him. From the folds of her rough-spun skirt, she produced a small, wicked-looking skinning knife, Pike's knife. Liam realized with a jolt. "Silas is planning to move you tonight," she whispered, her breath fanning his ear as she expertly sliced through the zip ties binding his wrists. "He says you know too much. He's going to make you disappear, like he did with Deputy Hanks and Finn." Liam's blood ran cold. "Finn? Hanks? What happened to them?" "They're alive. For now. Locked in one of the old ore bunkers up at the mine. Silas is trying to decide what to do with them. He's angry they brought you here, angrier that Hanks is a cop." Her hands trembled as she worked on the ties around his ankles. "There's a supply tunnel. It leads out to the north face of Echo Ridge, near the old ventilation shafts. It's a long way from their main routes. If we move fast—" "We?" Liam stared at her. "You're coming with me?" She nodded, her jaw set, though her eyes were wide with terror. I can't stay here, not anymore." "What you said? About Mum? Moondog. It's like a key, unlocking things I'd forgotten, or was made to forget." A single tear traced a path through the dust on her cheek. "He lied to me. All these years." His hands and feet were free. He chafed his wrists, feeling the blood rush back, painful and tingling. "Lyra, this is incredibly dangerous. If he catches you, he'll kill me," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "He might kill me anyway if he finds out what I remember. I heard him talking to Pike. He said I was becoming unreliable." She stood up, pulling him to his feet. "We have to go, now, while Cletus is on watch. He's slow, easily distracted." Liam felt a surge of protectiveness, of awe for this young woman, his sister who was risking everything. The faint star of hope he'd nurtured for a decade was, against all odds, beginning to burn brighter, fueled by her courage. "Lead the way, Lyra," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Let's get you home." She took his hand, her small, calloused fingers surprisingly strong, and pulled him towards a dark, narrow opening behind a stack of crates he hadn't noticed before. The mouth of the escape tunnel, and the first step on a perilous journey out of the Viper's nest. The supply tunnel was little more than a damp, narrow burrow, shored up with rotting timbers and smelling of mildew and something vaguely metallic. Lyra moved through it with a familiarity that spoke of previous, perhaps furtive, explorations. Liam, taller and broader, struggled to keep up, banging his head and shoulders on the low ceiling and protruding rocks. His heart hammered in his chest, a frantic drumbeat against the suffocating silence. "How much further?" he whispered, his breath catching in the stale air. "Not far to the old ventilation shaft access," Lyra breathed back. "It's a climb, but it opens out onto the North Scree slope. They rarely patrol that side, too unstable." They pressed on, the only sound their ragged breathing and the scuff of their boots on the tunnel floor. Just as Lyra indicated a faint glimmer of light ahead, the base of the ventilation shaft, a harsh shout echoed from the tunnel entrance behind them. "Lara, you treacherous little witch, where do you think you're going with him?" It was Pike's voice, raw with fury. "He found us!" Lyra gasped, her eyes wide with terror. "Cletus must have raised the alarm. Run!" They scrambled towards the light. Pike's heavy footsteps thudding closer behind them. The base of the ventilation shaft was a rusted metal ladder ascending into darkness. "Up!" Liam urged, giving Lyra a boost. She climbed with desperate speed. Liam followed, his recently freed limbs protesting, the adrenaline masking the pain. Pike reached the bottom of the ladder just as Liam was halfway up. A gunshot exploded in the confined space, the bullet ricocheting off the metal rungs with a terrifying shriek inches from Liam's head. Dust and debris rained down. "You ain't getting away, O'Connell," Pike roared, fumbling to reload. They burst out of the top of the shaft into the blinding desert sunlight, momentarily disoriented. They were on a steep, treacherous scree slope, overlooking a vast expanse of jagged canyons. Below them, the main compound of Echo Ridge Mine was already stirring like an angry hornet's nest. Men were spilling out of the buildings, shouting, some already pointing up towards their position. "This way," Lyra cried, pulling Liam along the precarious slope, heading for a jumble of massive boulders that might offer temporary cover. They stumbled and slid, loose rocks cascading around them. Suddenly, from the direction of the main valley road leading towards Echo Ridge, came a sound that made Liam's heart leap. The distinct rising wail of police sirens. Multiple sirens, growing rapidly closer. "Finn," Liam breathed, a wild hope surging through him. Finn must have activated the emergency GPS tracker Liam had insisted they both carry, a small, coin-sized device he'd clipped to his belt. He'd told Finn if he was ever out of contact for more than a few hours on a solo search, or if they got separated in a dangerous situation, to hit the panic button. The smugglers, hearing the sirens, were thrown into chaos. Some started running back towards the mine buildings, others towards hidden vehicles. Silas burst out of the main saloon-like structure, his face a mask of thunderous rage. He spotted Liam and Lyra high on the slope. "Get them!" he bellowed, his voice carrying across the distance. But even as he shouted, the first of Sheriff Thorne's cruisers, lights flashing, screeched to a halt at the entrance to the mine compound, deputies piling out, weapons drawn. Silas, seeing his escape route cut off, did the unthinkable. He grabbed Lyra, who had momentarily frozen at the sight of the police, and yanked her in front of him as a human shield, pressing the cold muzzle of a heavy revolver to her temple. "No!" Liam roared, helpless, watching the scene unfold from his precarious perch. "Stay back, Thorne!" Silas screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Or the girl dies! I swear I'll do it!" Sheriff Thorne, who had emerged from his cruiser, held up a hand, signaling his men to hold their fire. "Let her go, Silas. It's over. There's nowhere for you to run." "I'm not going back to prison," Silas yelled, his eyes wild. He began to drag Lyra towards a battered ATV parked near one of the sheds, his gun still pressed to her head. Liam watched in an agony of indecision. He was too far away to intervene directly. Any move he made might spook Silas into pulling the trigger. His gaze fell on a loose pile of rocks near his feet, dislodged by their frantic climb. One was large, fist-sized, with a sharp edge. An idea, desperate and reckless, formed in his mind. "Silas," Liam shouted, his voice echoing across the canyon. "You said you protected her. You said you were her family. Is this how you treat family? Using her to save your own skin?" He pitched his voice to Carrie, to cut through Silas's panic. "You're no better than the coyotes that prey on the weak." His words, or perhaps the desperate truth in them, seemed to penetrate Lyra's terror-induced paralysis. Silas, momentarily distracted by Liam's shouting, loosened his grip on her arm fractionally. It was all the opening she needed. With a sudden, fierce cry, Lyra stomped down hard on Silas's instep with her heavy boot. As he grunted in pain and surprise, his grip faltering further, she twisted violently, driving her elbow sharply into his ribs. The revolver discharged with a deafening roar, the bullet going wide, kicking up dust harmlessly. In that instant of chaos, as Silas staggered, Liam acted. With all his strength, he hurled the sharp-edged rock. It flew true, striking Silas hard on the side of the head. The smuggler grunted, his eyes rolling back, and he crumpled to the ground, unconscious, dropping the gun. Lyra, free, stumbled back, her face pale but resolute. The deputies surged forward. Pike and Cletus, seeing their leader fall, threw down their weapons and raised their hands. The brief, violent siege of Echo Ridge Mine was over. Liam scrambled down the scree slope, heedless of the danger, his only thought to reach Lyra. He half slid, half ran, reaching her just as Thorne's deputies were securing Silas with handcuffs. "Lyra, are you all right?" he gasped, pulling her into a fierce hug. She clung to him, trembling violently, a choked sob escaping her. He was going to—" "I know," Liam said, stroking her hair. "But you were incredible. You saved yourself. You saved us all." Sheriff Thorne approached them, his face grim but relieved. "O'Connell! Miss O'Connell! You two have caused more trouble in 2 days than this county's seen in a decade." He allowed himself a small, weary smile. "Finn Riley's GPS tracker led us right here. He and Deputy Hanks are being attended to by paramedics. Shaken up, dehydrated, but they'll be all right. Seems Silas wasn't quite ready to dispose of a lawman just yet." Liam looked at Lyra, truly looked at her. The haunted emptiness in her eyes was still there, but now, mixed with it, was a spark of something new, a fierce, resilient light. The desert had tried to break her. Silas had tried to remake her. But the core of Lyra O'Connell, the strong, spirited girl he remembered, had survived. The illusion Silas had built around her had been shattered, and in the violent desert storm of their escape and rescue, she had found her own strength. The faint star had become a beacon. The aftermath of the raid on Echo Ridge Mine was a whirlwind of organized chaos. Sheriff Thorne's deputies, reinforced by state troopers, swarmed the compound, methodically searching every dilapidated building, every dark tunnel. Silas and his crew, including Pike and Cletus, were taken into custody, their reign of smuggling and terror in the Devil's Anvil brought to an abrupt end. Finn and Deputy Hanks, bruised and dehydrated but otherwise unharmed, were reunited with Liam, the relief palpable. Finn, true to form, managed a weak joke about desert hospitality needing improvement. But for Liam, the focus was singular: Lyra. She was quiet, almost shocked, as paramedics checked her over. Physically, she was unharmed, save for a few scrapes and bruises from their frantic escape. The deeper wounds, Liam knew, were invisible, etched onto her soul by a decade of captivity and manipulation. As the desert sun began to dip below the jagged peaks of the Serpent's Tooth Range, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Sheriff Thorne sat with Liam and Lyra near one of the cruisers. The air was cooling rapidly, and a deputy had draped a blanket over Lyra's shoulders. "We found your mother's remains, Liam," Thorne said, his voice gentle but direct. Silas confessed. After Alara inadvertently photographed their convoy near the old Apache Trail, they tracked her back to her campsite in Blue Mesa. She fought them, as Silas said. They buried her in a shallow grave not far from there. "We've secured the site. I'm so sorry." Liam nodded slowly, a profound, aching sadness settling over him. It was the news he'd expected, dreaded, for 10 long years. Yet, hearing it confirmed brought a strange, grim sense of closure. The not knowing had been a particular kind of torture. Now, at least, Ilara could be brought home, laid to rest properly. He looked at Lyra, whose face was pale in the fading light. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks. She had no conscious memory of Ilara's final moments, Silas having twisted the narrative of her abandonment. But the truth, however brutal, was now laid bare. Lyra, Thorne continued, addressing her softly. You were a victim in all of this, a child when they took you. Everything you did to survive, everything Silas forced you to do or witness, you will not be held accountable for that. You have immunity, but, he paused, your testimony will be crucial in ensuring Silas and his men stay locked away for a very long time. Can you tell us about their operations? About Echo Ridge? Lyra took a deep, shuddering breath. Then, in a low, steady voice, she began to speak. She detailed the smuggling routes, the types of artifacts they trafficked, the secret storage locations within the mine complex, the names of buyers she'd occasionally overheard. She spoke of the fear that had been her constant companion, the casual cruelty of the men, and Silas's chilling ability to control and manipulate. It was a harrowing account, painting a picture of a sophisticated criminal enterprise thriving for years in the desolate heart of the desert. Her information would prove invaluable, leading to further arrests and the recovery of countless stolen treasures in the weeks to come. As she spoke, Liam watched her, a fierce pride mingling with his sorrow. She was finding her voice, reclaiming her identity from the ashes of Lara. The journey ahead would be arduous, he knew. Therapists, counselors, the slow, painful process of rebuilding a life stolen. She would need to learn about the world she'd been denied, to reconnect with a past she barely remembered. "What happens now?" Lyra asked when she had finished, her voice barely a whisper, exhaustion etched on her young face. "Now," Liam said, taking her hand, his grip firm and reassuring, "now we go home, what's left of it, and we build something new, together." Sheriff Thorne arranged for them to be driven back to Redemption. As they left Echo Ridge behind, the silhouettes of the decaying mine structures stark against the starlit sky, Liam felt a chapter of his life definitively close. The relentless search that had consumed his youth was over. The questions that had haunted him for a decade had been answered, however brutally. The drive was quiet. Lyra leaned her head against Liam's shoulder and, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, slept a sleep that wasn't born of fear or exhaustion, but of a fragile, nascent peace. Arriving at his small house in Redemption, the one that had been Alara's and his grandmother's, felt surreal. It was a haven, a sanctuary from the horrors of the desert. Finn, having collected his jeep, promised to check in daily. The coming weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, therapy sessions for Lyra, and the heartbreaking task of arranging Alara's funeral. The community of Redemption, which had mourned with Liam for 10 years, now rallied around him and Lyra, offering support in countless ways. Lyra slowly began to open up. She devoured the photo albums Liam showed her, listened intently to his stories of their mother, of their childhood, of the family she was stolen from. There were moments of profound sadness, of anger, of confusion. But there were also glimmers of the old Lyra. A quick wit, a flash of her mother's stubborn spirit, a deep capacity for love that even Silas's cruelty couldn't extinguish. One evening, months later, they were sitting on the porch, watching the desert sunset. Lyra, no longer Lara, was sketching in a notepad, a talent she'd rediscovered. "Do you think," she asked quietly, not looking up, "Mum would be proud of us?" Liam looked at his sister, at the strength and resilience that shone in her sapphire eyes, so like Alara's. He thought of their mother's adventurous spirit, her fierce love for her children. "Yeah, Lyra," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I think she would be incredibly proud." The Devil's Anvil had taken much from them, but it had also, in its own harsh way, forged an unbreakable bond between a brother and sister who had refused to let the darkness win. The long night was over, and though scars remained, a new dawn was breaking over the O'Connell family, promising not a return to what was lost, but the beginning of something new, something strong, something born of survival and an unyielding love. The healing had just begun, but they would face it, as they had faced everything else, together.